Hey everyone, welcome back to the Whirling Circles Internal Martial Arts Podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Garcia, joined as always by Frank Allen. How you feeling, Frank?
I'm fine.
Yeah. I like it. I like your shirt.
Thank you. I like
Very
it too.
fashionable. And then of course, Jon Molenar. How you feeling, Jon?
I'm good. Good. Fully woken up.
Nice, yeah.
We start recording what's still kind of early. So
Yeah, you have a funky sleep schedule. I'm always like, is Jon up yet? I don't know.
yeah.
Frank is usually texting me at 5 or 6 in the morning.
Right. Which you've
And
already
then,
been awake for for a couple hours by then, right?
yeah, right. My wife is always trying to get me to get up early and be a morning person. And I do feel productive when I get up early, and I do get up relatively early, but I get up more out of mandate because I have to get my daughter ready for school, and
Mandate.
if I could, I'd sleep in a little bit more. I think when I was sick a couple weeks ago, I was able to sleep into like 10 or 11 o'clock, and that was like the first time I've done that in like 15 years.
Oh wow.
Yep. All right, cool. Yeah, so we are doing a full episode on the Wu-Tang Clan and RZA, and it's gonna be a hip hop episode. Um, so no, yeah. All jokes aside, we're gonna be doing a little bit of a breakdown of the Wudang Mountains, and there's a lot of things that, people always when I share like the podcast and say, oh yeah, this is in partnership with my school, the Wudong P.C.A. They're like, the Wu-Tang, like what's that Wu-Tang? So there's definitely a lot in pop culture, like we've always talked about, a lot in pop culture about Wu-Tang and the Wudong, and we've talked a little bit about this, but we're gonna do a full episode dedicated to it. And of course, what's really exciting for me is that you both have been there, trained there, and so there's a lot of great resources y'all can bring to everybody. So, Frank, you wanna get us started on a little bit of the history of the Wudong?
Sure. Um, well, for starters, it's a small mountain range. It's not. There is a mountain that gets referred to as Wudang Mountain. Is actually the golden peak of the Wudang Mountain Range. It's a small mountain range, and it's named for Xuan Wu, who is the patriarch of Wudang Shan, the Wudang Mountain, and he's also the guardian of the north and the god of martial arts. And there's, of course, some interesting legends, some of them contradicting each other. His trademark is the turtle and the snake, or the turtle and the snake combined into one being, or separated into turtle and snake. Again, there are different versions of different things. Um, Most of them have him starting out as a butcher. And then the more common one is he gets upset about all the animals he's killed, and he's sitting by a river, and he decides he can't live this way anymore, and he tears out his stomach and his intestines and throws his stomach on one side, his intestines on the other. And as he's dying, this goddess comes down and feels that that was a very exemplary thing to do. So she rises him up to Chinese heaven and turns him into an immortal. But then when he's up there, he hears that as he became an immortal, so did his stomach and his intestines. And his stomach has become this big demon turtle, and his intestines have become this demon snake, and that they're now traveling up and down the river and destroying the villages, killing the people, burning the villages and whatnot. And he has to go down and take care of that. So he goes down and does such a good job of it that when he comes back, they make him the demon hunter, and he becomes the god of martial arts and the demon hunter of heaven. Uh, One of the other stories, which I think was just really came up to counteract the Buddhist story, the Buddhists have a story that Bodhidharma was meditating and he fell asleep and he was so angry at sleeping that he woke up and he cut his eyelids off and threw them down. And from his eyelids, the tea bushes grew. And after that, the monks drank tea to stay awake while they're meditating. So, of course, the Taoists couldn't let that go. So, all of a sudden, they changed this, came up with this other story of Zhuan Wu was meditating and he got interrupted by his stomach started growling because he hadn't eaten. And he was so upset at his digestive system that he ripped out his stomach and threw it on one side and his intestines and threw them on the other side. And they became the snake and turtle gods that protected his meditation so that nothing ever disturbed his meditation again. Uh, Meanwhile, though, they have the guardians of the four directions, and he's the guardian of the north, the guardian of the cold winter regions. And he's also, the god of martial arts as well as a demon hunter. And so that's what the mountain is named for, or the mountain range. Wudang Mountain Range is named for Zhuan Wu. And it's also one of the four sacred mountains of Taoism. And the temples are considered a counterpart to Shaolin Temple. But I'll get into that. That really came up late in the game. The first temple, the Five Dragons Temple, was built during the Tang Dynasty. And that's like the 6 to 900s. Other temples were built in the Song and Yuan dynasties. The largest temple was built during the Ming Dynasty. And Purple Cloud, sometimes known as Purple Palace Temple, but also originally Purple Cloud Temple, one of the ones that we go to all the time, was built between 1119 and 1126 during the Northern Song Dynasty. Then in 1413, during the Ming Dynasty, it was rebuilt. Then 1803 to 1820, it was extended during the Qing Dynasty. And that's the place that we visit now, the one that was rebuilt in the Ming and extended in the Qing. Also, Yujiang Palace, which was 600 years old in 2003, burned to the ground when it was set on fire accidentally by an employee of one of the martial arts schools that were there. And they haven't ever repaired that. Sometimes we go and look at the ruins. Now, when you get to this Wudong and Shaolin thing, that actually started in 1928. The Republic put on the first big national tournament because they had decided that they were going to improve the health of the people. They were going to push martial arts and sports and try and get the people interested in martial arts and sports and training and getting healthy, as opposed to, 40 to 60% of the country being strung out on opium, which of course had been pushed in there primarily by the English. I mean, the other European countries got in on it, but the English started it because the English really, really wanted Chinese porcelain. They wanted Chinese silks, and they really, really wanted Chinese tea. And the Chinese were not interested in their coal and their lumber and their wool and whatever else they had. The Chinese had no interest in that whatsoever. So they were paying silver and gold, and it was creating a trade deficit, a huge trade deficit. And the British already controlled India, and there was lots of opium in India. And China had kept opium out for hundreds and hundreds of years. Strict border controls, no opium. And the British started bringing opium in and selling it to balance their trade deficit. And the Chinese government said, you can't do that. People are getting turned into drug addicts. You just can't do that. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. That's what the opium wars were, with the British bringing in their gunships and their superior military technology to force the Chinese to let them sell opium in China. That's what the opium wars were. I mean, it's been said perhaps the karma of all the drug problems of the West in the 1900s and into somewhat today was all the karma of what they did to China in the 1800s. And so in the 1920s and 30s, the Republic decided to try and do something about this, and they used as their example the Qingwu Physical Culture Association of Shanghai, which was the first school. There was a martial arts school that was not just a vocational school. Before that, you studied martial arts because you wanted to take the test and increase your rank in the military. You wanted to become a security guard. You wanted to become a cargo guard. You wanted to become a bodyguard. It was vocational training. And the Ching Wu, started by Hoyunja, was the first one for people that just wanted to learn some self defense. They wanted an activity. They wanted a social group to belong to. All the stuff that people study martial arts for now, actually in China, began with the Ching Wu. And the government decided this was a good idea. So they wanted to open similar schools all over the country and wanted a national one in Nanjing. And they wanted them in all the provincial capitals, as many places as possible. But they had to staff them, so they started this huge national tournament in 1928, which was a forms tournament and a fighting tournament, which, by the way, I've been told the Bagua guys were not allowed to fight. We weren't allowed to fight in that because they're like, you guys aren't sport fighters. All you do is attack the eyes, the throat, the groin, the knees. You just don't know anything about sport fighting. So you guys stick to forms. Um, and interestingly enough, when it was still tough enough fighting that when they got down to they had hundreds of guys fighting and they just fought each other till there were just 10 left. And when there was 10 guys left, the officials looked at these 10 guys and said, they're going to kill each other. They're going to get any instructors out of this, out of them. They'll just all be dead. So they called it off and made the 10 guys vote for who they thought should be the grand champion. And they voted in some large northern Shaolin guy. But what I find most interesting about that, of the 10 guys, 3 of them were brothers. And they were brothers whose martial arts were a combination of Xingyi, Northern Shaolin, and Western boxing. And all 3 brothers made it to the final 10. But to categorize and start off with 2 kind of teams, for the first time ever, the government came up with this thing of a Shaolin team and a Wudong team. And it really had very little to do with the temples. Any martial art that they knew had any element of Neidan training or internal training got called Wudong. Everything else got called Shaolin. So it really had very little to do with the temples. But that's where this whole Wudong versus Shaolin thing started, was the 1928 tournament decided that was the way to categorize their opening teams. And since then, as you know, a billion movies, books, weird rap groups, everything um, based on this Wudong versus Shaolin. Because in Pinyin it's spelled with a T instead of I mean, in Wade Giles it's spelled with a T instead of a D. The Pinyin is Wudang, D-A-N-G, but the old Wade Giles system is spelled T-A-N-G. So all of a sudden you get Wu-Tang, um, which is, and then there's the legend of Taiji starting on Wudang Mountain, that the very famous Taoist mystic alchemist considered to become an immortal, Chan San Feng, was an actual guy who was a tremendous teacher, alchemist, did all kinds of great Taoist stuff, but there's nothing in history at all about him having anything to do with martial arts. But as we mentioned when we were doing our Tai Chi episode, when the Yang family created Tai Chi and came up with the name Tai Chi Chuan, which means grand ultimate fist, which actually relates to the grand ultimate design, which we would call the yin yang, which in China is called the Tai Chi. And of course, I've seen William Chen's people get into great trouble because he used to translate on his T-shirts as grand ultimate fist. They was like, "Oh, you guys think you're the best?" No, it just, but it means a symbol. It means a symbol. But and but in those days, and to some extent, right up till the most recent times in China, they wanted stuff to be old and tested. The same way over here, you want stuff to be new and improved. So the same way our salespeople have to come up with some way to show it's new and improved, even if it's the same old crap. Whenever they created anything, they had to prove it was old and tested. So the best way to do that was to pick an ancient patriarch and say, "Oh, it came from him, and he wrote a book, and the book went from da 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 da," and and then we got it and changed it, and that's how you made your stuff old and tested. And the Yang family came up with this story of Jon and Feng, seeing a snake and a bird fight, and the bird's attacking, and the snake is weaving to the side. And I love the snake's actually the one doing the Tai Chi and weaving and weaving. Then eventually the bird makes a mistake, and the snake takes an eye out, and the bird flies away with one eye. And it never happened. It's a great story, but it never happened. But that becomes the origin story of Tai Chi. So Wudong, particularly the Golden Peak of Wudong, has a reputation of being the founding place of Tai Chi from this story. And again, like I said in the Tai Chi thing, just to go over briefly, when the monks of Wudong heard it, Taoist monks always being very practical instead of going, that's not true, like, that's a pretty good idea. And all of a sudden they had Wudang Mountain Tai Chi with lineages back to the 1200s when Chan San Feng was there. But oddly enough, no one ever saw this Tai Chi till the very late early 1900s when the Yang family had already made Tai Chi Chuan really famous by being the martial art of the palace guards of the Imperial Palace, now known as the Forbidden City. And Jonathan and I have been there training 4 times, and Jonathan has been there by himself in the summer when I wasn't with him. Although I think I could avoid Wudang Mountain in the summer.
Yes, you would want to avoid, Frank. It's beautiful, but we're usually going in sort of the fall / like winter, almost right before it closes down, right? It's like November, and then it closes to the public. So we often see it where it's a bit of snow on the ground and sort of still usually comfortable enough weather, but it's very possible on some of our trips that we see it with snow on the ground. In the summer, they call it the season of swirling mists. And the first day that I arrived there in the summer, it was exactly what you would want from a kung fu movie or whatever. We went to Frank, what's the temple or the monastery that's on the side of the cliff? That you with the dragon's head. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know the place, but I don't remember the name.
Okay. So we went to that, and you're literally the place is hanging off the side of a cliff, and there's incredible views of it. And below in the valley, there was all these swirling mists and things like trees coming in and out of the mists and everything. It was gorgeous. Looked like, Tai Chi symbols just happening in the mist. It was amazing.
The very ancient brush paintings.
Yes, exactly. The very next day, all of that fog and humidity and everything just sort of blew in and enveloped the entire place, like the entire mountain range. You could be standing outside and you could see beyond 10 feet, but anything closer than say 10 or 15, 20 feet, you could see the mist between you. Like it was just like a haze everywhere. And the humidity was out of control. It was like just walking around, you were literally, you weren't sweating, you were having condensation on you. So yes, the time when Frank and I usually visit is the time that most people would probably be better off visiting. But there was actually tons of Chinese there during the summer, which is not a bad thing, but it's certainly our time. Our visits during the fall is more ideal. It's easier to sit down at restaurants. It's easier to go for walks and see the different monasteries and everything in the fall rather than in the summer.
There's very few tourists in the fall. There's the people that are training there, and the people that are training them that are serious Taoists, but not very many just outright tourists at all. A few, but very, very few, because we're usually there. They shut down for the cold months, and we often hit the last or next to last week before they shut the thing down, which is, I think they shut it down the end of November, and that's when we go. That's when I want to be there. I mean, the time of swirling mist is no time for an old fat guy to be there at all. So I don't want anything to do with going to the time of swirling mist. I realize it's beautiful, just like the paintings, and I'm very happy to have John tell me about it. But 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 we go for the training, which began actually a little over a decade ago. Tina and I were in White Cloud Temple in Beijing, which is a complete reality sect head temple where all the leaders of the complete reality sect are, and where they teach all their intellectual stuff and whatnot. And it was interesting. Tina had bought a Taoist outfit, robe, and hat and whatnot at the gift shop the day before, and she said, "Well, I'm going to go back and we're going to take some publicity pictures there." And I said, "You're going to walk around the temple dressed up like a monk?" And she said, "They can't say anything to me. They sold it to me." So we went, and she put on her outfit, and she was doing a lot of poses, and I was taking a lot of pictures, and they came out really nice. That's some really good stuff. But doing all of a sudden, this youngish monk walks out of a classroom, and he and Tina engage in conversation, and he invites us into the classroom, and he was really intrigued to see us there and whatnot. And in the process, he told us how White Cloud Temple is the number one place for intellectual Taoist studies in North China. The complete reality sect is mostly all of North China. And he said, this is where you go for intellectual studies. And he was actually there studying for some type of Taoist degree. But he said, for physical studies, the place is Wudang Mountain, which is where I live, and invited us at some point to come and train with him on Wudang Mountain. And it took 3 or 4 years, but eventually we made it down and hooked up. His name's Chen Li Sheng, and very, very fine gentleman. And although interesting enough, he's not in the complete reality sect. He's a member of the Xuan Wu sect, like I said, the god of martial arts sect. So he primarily teaches martial arts, but of course he teaches everything else also. And he's lived on the mountain for many years. He now lives down in the little city below the mountain, sometimes known as Wudong City. I don't know what its real name is, but it may just be a suburb of Shurian, which is the big city that's closest to Wudong Mountain, which is famous. It's kind of the Detroit, or the old Detroit of China. It's noted for its automobile industry, where they build all the automobiles. And then right at the edge of it is this little city, either Wudong City or a suburb of Shurian. I'm really not sure. And then you go up the mountain, and he lives down there, and he's a member of a sect that allows him to get married. So he's married and has a kid, has two by now, because there's another one on the way the last time we were there. Really sweet wife who was a grammar school teacher who, and she taught English. She's fluent in English. He doesn't speak English, but neither do any of our teachers. Like I said, without Tina's translation, these trips would never happen because it all relies on Tina working like crazy, setting up everything and translating everything. Those trips are really an awful lot of work for her, and we're very thankful because without her, it wouldn't happen. But his wife spoke English, so like, and he's the type of guy. Like one year when we showed up while we were in town, he took us to his house for lunch. The whole crew of people that had come to study went to his house for lunch, and it was great. It was so typically Chinese. It was like any modern apartment, like a beautiful modern apartment, except it had no heat whatsoever. None. They just, wore extra clothes when they got cold. No heat at all. And that led to a funny moment. He had his 2-year-old kid that he was actually had started training the boy already. And he had a little studio in the basement. We went down to the basement, and he had the kid show us what he could do. And part of it was a full split. Now, Chinese kids traditionally, and this is a traditional household, they don't wear diapers. They wear pants that the crotch is all cut out. And then they just go. And you see, this kid does a full split, and all of a sudden you see him get this really strange look on his face. And you realize it's because his little naked crotch had just hit the freezing cold floor while he was doing his split. It was a rather amusing moment. But yeah, Chen Li Sheng, really, really, really nice man, and that's who we train with. And as we've been there, like when we were first there, we were the group of people that came, and he had a few students coming and going. And each year he got more and more students until the last couple times we've been there, he actually has his own school up in the mountains with their own place and lots of people, lots and lots of people, mostly Chinese people. There isn't that many foreigners. There's a few of us foreigners, but mostly Chinese people come, and some of them are actually live-in students that stay the whole time you're allowed to be up there. They live up there and train with him all the time. And we went the first couple of years that we went, we studied the classical number one Qigong set, the five Wudang animals. And we did that for a couple of trips. And then we went back. I wanted to experience his Bagua. So next time we went, we did the single and double palm changes of Wudang Bagua. After which he told Tina, he said, in Beijing, you guys already have the best Bagua teacher that there is. There's no need of you guys doing any more of any other Bagua. And then I'd been trying, but we couldn't get. Finally, the last time we were there, we started with his meditation program, which is what I had wanted from the get go, was to really get into the actual Wudang system of meditation. And we got quite a ways in, and it was very, very interesting. And that's what we plan to continue when we get to go back, whenever that is to continue working on the basic meditation system or his meditation system of on Wudang Mountain. And it's an incredible place to study. And we train for a few hours, and then people go off climbing around and going up the mountains and doing all kinds of stuff I don't do. The first time we were there, I did it. And then I'm like, okay, been there, done that. Don't like these stairs. But it's beautiful, beautiful place to be. Beautiful place to be. Really nice people, and the teacher's just the sweetest, nicest teacher that we've ever been around. I mean, our teachers are all really, really nice guys, but he kind of tops it out for being a real sweetheart.
Frank, maybe we should say something about sort of how the Chinese government has structured it. It's almost like a culture or a nature preserve, right? Like, I mean, it basically you pay a fee to enter the mountains, and once you've gone through the turnstile, inside it's all buses. The only cars are things that are people working there that are using. So essentially, you get
And
around.
very few of those.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's kind of like my question. I like, what's the tourism there for? Is it because of the history of it in popular
Legendary,
culture?
man.
Like,
all heard
or is
about
it
the
the
Wudang
wildlife
clan.
preserve? No, I mean, like, the fact that it's in such popular culture. I mean, because a lot of people in the U.S. know the Wu-Tang Clan and all this kind of stuff, but Wudang and this fictional martial arts history is all throughout theater, literature, movies in Asia. Is that the main draw for tourism, or is it like this wildlife, nature, conservation? Like, what is the tourism going there for?
The main draw is it's one of the four sacred Taoist mountains. And fortunately or unfortunately, the reality of Taoism in China is tourism saved Taoism. Um, they were not paying any attention to it, and everything was kind of falling apart. And a few people were training at these places and whatnot, till they realized that people wanted to come and see them. And then the government moved in and started fixing things up, started adding hotels, fixed up the roads, set up this bus system where pretty much everybody's supposed to travel by by the bus. I mean, our teacher and his wife, who takes small groups of people around, small groups of tourists, they travel by the bus. And there's like one truck that gets to bring food up and down, and occasionally will help us with our luggage up and down and whatnot, so that we don't have to take the luggage on the bus, which has no luggage racks or anything. But everybody travels in these green buses, and it's very, very controlled. And the buses, I know it's the last time we were there, were hybrid buses, and they're trying to keep everything as pristine as possible. So you have this mix of the old temples and the whole nature thing, and then you have various teachers. I mean, our teacher's one of many, many teachers on the mountain and all the different places. And I said there's more than one temple, and there are teachers all over the mountain teaching martial arts and meditation and qigong, and people go for that. And then because of that, there are actual serious monks and nuns that live there. In fact, we found it interesting that the Purple Cloud or Purple Palace Temple, which we never realized till last time, is completely a woman's temple. When we go there, there's all kinds of people there. But Tina was talking to this nun and discovered it's completely a nun's temple. It's completely run by a hierarchy of women. It's completely women, nuns that study and live there, that all the real people, that are the actual people that live and train there all the time, are women. It's actually a woman's temple. But there are people like that get to be actual monks because the government will support them because it brings in such great tourism. And most of the tourism is Chinese. China is a huge country. It actually has more land mass than we do. So people come from all over China to go to the Chinese tourist spots. And when you say tourism, you may get the idea it's all foreigners. No, the foreigners are a small percentage. Most of the tourists are Chinese.
Well, it's interesting because I know I know a lot of the fictional Wudang, portrayals. The female masters would come out of the Wudang and not out of the Shaolin, and that was the whole thing. I know a lot of the female masters were from the Wudang, and so it's interesting to hear that there's some correlation, but not probably for any significant reason. But yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Frank.
Well, Taoism is a lot more open towards
Exactly.
women training and women reaching stuff and having, special training programs for women and training programs that can be done by either. Buddhism is a pretty patriarchal system.
But also too in terms of like marriage and all that kind of stuff for men and women, is always I remember in all the kung fu flicks, like all the married masters would be from Wudang and the Taoists, and that stuck in my head. Like, so it's good to hear that some of the stuff that I watched in kung fu movies actually was related to some reality.
Has some base in reality. Yes, has some base in reality.
There's I think that it probably varies depending on the sect of Taoism, but our teacher actually discussed at one point something to do with levels of commitment within his sect, and the higher level of commitment, the way that they all have long hair at Wudang, the monks, but they wear a top knot and there's a stick through the top knot, and depending on which way the stick is facing, tells you what level of commitment they are. But they wear hats over it usually, so you're not actually, at a glance, you don't know who's committed or whatever to what level. But whatever this higher level of commitment is, they're committing to celibacy, to not drinking alcohol, to certain things. So
it's like, I'm available, I'm unavailable.
Right, exactly.
Oh, boy.
Perfect. So Frank, I wanted to ask you, so this is a distinction that's a little bit confusing for me at Wudang, Shawn. I've been referring well, you said temples. I thought it was monasteries. Were they historically monasteries, but now they're more like temples? Like, because certainly the Purple Palace has the women that are living there, but that's a nunnery basically, or it's open to the public too. I don't know. How do you draw these distinctions?
Well, I don't think there are quite the distinctions that there are in Buddhism and Christianity. A temple is a temple has certain people that stay there. A temple usually is a monastery and a temple, because as we know, a temple in China is never one building.
Right.
The temple is always a series of buildings. Yeah, it's always a complex. It's not a one building thing. And so I think that all the temples originally were monasteries. Now, some of them are just temples and basically for the tourists to come and look at. And some of them maintain their monastic aspect, like Purple Cloud. maintain their monastic aspect. But I'd be willing to bet that originally they all part of the temple thing was it was a temple, but it had its monastic aspect of people that lived there and trained there and went there just for quietude and whatever everything that happens in monasteries.
Yeah, I think that the wow, you say Purple Cloud. I love the name the Purple Palace, which is what we called it originally. Sounds like a strip club, but there and the Golden Summit are definitely they've got people living there. It seems like I'm trying to think of the other ones we've been to, but I don't know if I saw like facilities for like dormitories or whatever, but they may just be out of sight. So let's see, what did I want to ask? So yeah, I mean, basically there's the temple complexes. There's certain areas within the mountains that are set aside to allow for hotels to be basically like little clusters of hotels and restaurants. So most of what you're driving around is pretty pristine nature. And then, there'll be like a little cluster area where you could go for food or go for, a hotel or whatever. We've been staying, the first time we stayed relatively close to the Purple Palace, right, Frank? Or
Very
Purple
close.
Cloud.
Well, Purple Palace, also relates to the Purple Palace system.
No, I do not know that. Sorry.
Our 9 Palace.
Oh, okay.
And remember, the 9th one is fire, but it's also purple.
Okay, so that's actually
and the Purple Palace was the chief god of Heaven's palace, which had 9 pavilions in it.
Okay.
And many of the emperors tried to copy that by having 9 pavilions in their palace, with the main one being the Purple Palace.
Okay.
I mean, so that's got that whole mystical thing where there's the whole Purple Palace energy system that you use, but also it's the story of the celestial king of heaven's palace.
Right. I have to say, like, Wudang Shan is one of my favorite places I've been anywhere in the world. Like even considering, having traveled a ton in China, it's probably my favorite place I've been in China, and certainly in the top 3 in the world. And the things like Frank was just saying there, like all of these different temples, there's lots of symbolism, and the more you know, the more sort of rich the experience of being there is. Like the Golden Summit is sort of at the top of the tallest mountain in the area, and there's a symbolism in how the temple or monastery is built, where the roundness of the top of the mountain is the turtle's back, and there's a wall that is built specifically in a way to kind of curves and winds around the place, and that is like the snake. So you've got that turtle and snake symbolism being brought into that particular monastery. There's probably tons and tons of things if you have the knowledge that Frank has of these different things, that like the more that you know, the more you see, and the more sort of magical it is there. Because it's an incredibly rich place for sure.
Well, is it like, I mean, I'm trying to also paint a picture for our audience, like people in the yoga community, for instance, go to Rishikesh, India, and there's like a yoga studio everywhere, and people just like walk the streets, and like it's become like this thing that's part of their economy. Is that kind of like the thing at Wudong? Are people just like going there to try to train, or do you have to set something up? Can someone just like randomly go there and be like, I want to find a kung fu master?
You can, but
could try.
Whether you find the best one is another question.
Do you find one, period, if you don't contact him before you go there?
So you can't just walk the street. It's not a guy selling kung fu on every corner. It's not happening yet.
No.
That's good.
Well,
They're
so
selling they're selling swords all over the place.
yes, swords are everywhere. Every noodle shop also has a selection of swords for you to purchase. I was going to say about the martial arts schools thing. There's certainly ones that are set up, which are like larger schools and are actually under, like there's a monk that's teaching. Um, a few of them, the monk is speaking English. I mean, I've seen it on the internet. There's a few schools that have been produced that have
And
been
they have like open
specialized.
classes, so if people visit, they could theoretically try to
That I
register
don't,
for a
No,
class or
you
something.
have
that I
to
don't think.
you have to sign up to study at a program.
However, I have noted, is the area called the Crow's Nest, the one that we go to that is near the Cliff Monastery, Frank? I think it's the Crow's Nest.
I think so.
There's I met people when I was there during the summer who were studying like Tai Chi with somebody in like one of the hotel setups. So like there's people that are teaching that are not necessarily Taoists that are there, but you cannot understand the amount of difference and scale between Wudang Shan and Shaolin. Like when you go to visit Shaolin, it is so overwhelmingly commercial feeling. It is, I would never, ever want to train there. Even if those were the styles that I practiced, if you visited it, you'd be like, oh, this is not like
So you wait. You mean the guys on YouTube who say they've been training for years in Shaolin? They might be just training with some random dude in the street.
well, no, they might be training in like courtyards with like hundreds of other people doing the same kick on command over and over again. Like I mean, there is thousands and thousands of people training at Shaolin at any given time. Wudang Shan, when you are there, I mean, there's hotels, there's restaurants, there's swords being sold everywhere. However, the overwhelming feeling is not touristic. I think that actually of all the places in China that I've been that are sort of famous places, the Chinese have really done a good job with Wudang Shan, with keeping that sort of natural feeling and giving you a strong sense of what this place was once. You go there and you still feel like it's connected to that history. And so, yeah, I mean, it's special. It is different than many tourist attractions. Frank can tell you
I
the
would
great
also,
there's like a
yeah.
roller coaster and
Yeah, the
there's
Great
like
Roller Coaster. I heard.
Chinese
I would say
develop-
for our listeners who don't know, I mean, me and Frank have been around in a lot of places, but for those who know, Jon is a little bit of a world traveler. So for Jon to note that that this place is a pretty magical place, I think is pretty spectacular and speaking towards its credit. Frank, you were gonna add something about the random access to martial arts not being there.
Below the mountain, which is more like a hill, but where Shaolin Temple is, there's a place that's known as Shaolin City. And when you're driving to go to the temple, especially if you go there in the morning like we did, you go past school after school after school after school. Of each one has a big courtyard. Every courtyard is covered in young people, all wearing the same red jacket, all doing the exact same exercises at the exact same, and they're different schools, but they're all doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. You couldn't be more regimented. And it's not even the temple per se, it's the schools in the city where most of the people that go and say they studied at Shaolin. That's where they're studying because they did. They studied with one of the Shaolin schools in Shaolin City because there's not that much space in Shaolin Temple per se. It's mostly the schools, but they're all so exactly the same and exactly regimented, and you just get a feeling of vast commercialism or it could even be military from the way it's set up, but it's not. It's because you see they're all mostly young folks that are training to do this, that are hoping that they can go somewhere in the world where there isn't this, and they can get out of whatever they've been doing and become Shaolin teachers. But and then there is teaching on the mountain also, which I would imagine the teaching in the temple is a little higher level than the teaching in these multitude of schools in Shaolin City. But I don't know. It could be exactly the same. They have their specific things that they learn and that they do. I mean, Shi Ming, the most handsome monk in the world from New York City. That's how he built himself. Who, by the way, is RZA of Wudang Clan's kung fu teacher is Shi Ming, the most handsome Shaolin monk in the world. That's an interesting bit there. But there's another school out in Shi Ming used to be on Broadway, just below Houston. I don't think he's still there, but that's where he was. And there was another school that opened that was like a whole temple out in Flushing. And the guy in Flushing was someone who had been through the whole program and had been a teacher and something beyond a monk. I don't think he was quite an abbot, but something beyond a monk at Shaolin Temple. And he showed up and started telling people how Shi Ming was just a guy who'd studied the martial arts. He didn't do anything but the martial arts because the temple out in Flushing was they were teaching martial arts, but they were also teaching Chan Buddhism, which is what the Shaolin Temple is supposed to be about. Chan Buddhism, that when it moved to Japan became Zen Buddhism. And they were out there doing the Chan Buddhism and all the energetic practices of Chan Buddhism and whatnot, along with their martial arts. And his point, and I wasn't sure whether Shi Ming actually studied at the temple or whether he was just somebody from one of these schools in Shaolin City. He may have studied at the temple, but according to the guy in Flushing, it was just martial arts. It was none of the other stuff that made him a monk, i.e., there's a kind of discrepancy as to who's a monk. The people that study martial arts, they tend to show up in the West and say they're monks, and the people that did everything show up and say they're not. And maybe they're just different levels of monk. But
Right.
The Shaolin Temple is incredibly, incredibly commercial. And in fact, a few years ago, the abbot of Shaolin Temple actually, I don't know how it turned out, but there was a big court case of how he'd been embezzling money that was coming in for the temple and it was going into his pocket. And there was a huge court case, which I
Who was
don't know
that?
how it ended up.
In
The
China.
abbot, yes,
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
the
gee.
abbot, the abbot of Shaolin Temple had to, I don't know whether he won or lost, but he was had to go through this whole embezzlement trial. It's like, so it's business. Shaolin Temple is big business, and that's part of the reason I think the government has kept such a hand on Wudang Mountain because it's not any private business. The government set it up as like a historical area, and it may even be that um, what do they call it? They have the historical areas of the world that
Oh,
are
UNESCO
categorized.
World Heritage Sites.
Yes, I think Wudang Mountain is also an UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it really is. It's kept very, very pristine, very pristine. I mean, you still got the monkeys there. Isn't it a
Yes.
monkey park where you go to where you may see them or you may not? When I went there, we didn't see a single one, and we asked somebody, and they said the monkeys go where they want because they're not. There's no fences or cages or anything. It's just an area where they usually go that they call the monkey park. But there's nothing to stop them from going wherever they want on the mountain. So we were there for, 5, 6 hours and didn't see a single monkey. And then the next day, Richard took his family back and it was covered in monkeys. Because as the guy
Uh,
said, the monkeys go where they want. But it
Well,
is
not to get
both
yeah.
nature wise and temple and Taoist training and whatnot wise, it's kept very, very pristine. It's way beyond Shaolin Temple, and we've been to Chen Village a few times, and it seems like their goal is to become like Shaolin Temple.
yeah.
Because the first time we went there, it was pretty a farming village where they did lots of Tai Chi, and nobody wore any uniforms or anything. And then each time we'd go till the last time we were there, they had this huge park with these beautiful marble sculptures and this tremendous museum of Tai Chi and this area where they were building all these new dormitories and whatnot. So it's like we watched Chen Village change from a farming village where they did Tai Chi into may by now even be similar to Shaolin Temple. So Wudong is really, really unique in the way it's set up and the way that they have kept it, and pretty much probably the way it will stay, because I think the government has realized that that's its worth. That's what people go for. They don't need anything
preserving it,
different like the other two.
Well, not to get off topic, but you brought him up. Shaolin, isn't his school like not too far from you? Isn't like 3 or 4 blocks away from where you teach? Have you ever interacted with him?
Sure, Ming. If his school's still there, it's on Broadway, just south of Houston. Okay. So yeah, it's a few blocks. No, we didn't. I mean, we had when Kwando was right next door to us.
Well, currently he's on Allen Street. He's on Allen Street.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, Kwando was next door to us. Like we shared a wall, and they had a Shaolin teacher in there, known as Sifu. Everybody just called him Sifu. And he was like half Chinese and half Puerto Rican, and
nice.
apparently pretty well trained. Pretty well trained before he went crazy. Well, he's still well trained, but I mean, he wasn't crazy till later. But he was one wall away. I knew people that trained with him that came to me a little bit. You know, I never met the man. I never shook his hand. I never stood there and looked at him face to face. And he was one wall away for 20 years.
Yeah, that's how it is sometimes.
No, we did. By the way, his going crazy, if the story is right, was not exactly his fault. And it turned him into an alcoholic. But his mother was typical Chinese lady who, you know, aged very, very well. And she was in her 40s. And it was probably in the 70s, may have been into the 80s, but probably in the 70s, somewhere in there, when she had a young boyfriend who was 20 years younger than her, who was fairly high up in the Chinatown gangs when the Chinatown gang wars were going on. And legend has it that one day Sifu went over to visit his mom, walked in the apartment, and found her and the boyfriend decapitated.
Oh, wow.
And after that, you know, it's understandable that he went a little daffy.
Wow.
But
well, I wanted to add just because. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, finish up.
But he was the real deal. I mean, he was well trained. And people trained with him. They did a lot of Shaolin weapons and basic Shaolin forms and different stuff. At one point, he used to claim to be a Taoist also, but the funny part there is he used to put a list of stuff out that he taught, and one of them was a program to learn to drink 100 shots and not feel it at all. And then you'd see him literally staggering around the streets. And it wasn't his fault. I mean, anybody'd go crazy finding that kind of thing with their mom, but it was
pretty intense.
So you know,
but that's a weird course.
Because he couldn't drink the 100 shots and not feel it at all.
John, can you do the 100 shots?
He used to before. You know, maybe he used to before this.
I've heard about your Mongolia experiences, John.
Are we talking about Mongolian shots or Western shots? Because I've got a much better chance of drinking 100 Western shots than I do 100 Mongolian shots.
So
which are essentially 5 or 6 or 8 shots.
Yeah, it's like a 8-ounce cup of vodka. I was gonna just say for not to switch it up too much, but just for those who are interested, I'm a big hip hop fan. I know Frank, you appreciate the RZA, but I wanted to say how that kind of happened, because basically, for those who remember, here in the U.S. In the 80s, there used to be Saturday morning kung fu flicks on TV on Channel 11. And so a lot of people were inspired by those kung fu flicks. They actually get into martial arts. And you see definitely a big burst of martial arts in New York City. If you listen to our past episode, martial arts history in New York City, you can hear about some of that timeline stuff. But the Wu-Tang Clan, one of their founders, RZA, and the Old Dirty Bastard, were big fans of these flicks. It inspired them, and their first album, Enter the Wu-Tang, was basically inspired by that movie Shaolin and the Wu-Tang, or Shaolin and Wu-Tang. And basically the whole album is a back and forth battle between the Shaolin and Wu-Tang in this fictional portrayal of the Shaolin and Wu-Tang. But they take clips from the movie, sound bites and all this kind of stuff. And it's considered one of the top 10 best hip hop albums of all time in all of history. So for hip hop heads, like the Wu-Tang Clan, that's where it came from. They got inspired by a lot of this cool fictional, Chinese martial arts stuff. And it's pretty cool to see it translate over into the hip hop community. But and since then, they also, I think the Wu-Tang inspired a lot of people to get into martial arts. Now, is it the best form of martial arts? Not, that's to be argued, but I think it's pretty cool to see that influence of martial arts on popular culture. And the RZA is pretty dope, right, Frank?
Well, like I said, when they first appeared, we'd been around for over a decade, and we're like, well, they're not going to last very long. And I don't think
that album dropped in 93.
And I don't think they would have if. Yeah, I don't think they would have if RZA hadn't turned out to be, an actual musical genius, entertainment genius in general. Without him, they would have gone away like we hoped.
Well, the RZA was that, but they had a pretty interesting kind of free flowing. They were a free flowing collaboration, and not to get too off topic, but their approach was that they were a musical group they called the Clan, but they were all individual artists part of this clan. And there's, the RZA is the most notable one, but of course there's Method Man, Old Dirty Bastard. They went on to be multimillionaires and break into popular culture, besides RZA. So, there's these poor kids, black and brown poor kids coming out of Staten Island at a really tough situation, influenced by martial arts, popular culture. So I think it's a pretty inspiring story.
I wonder what the current thing is. Like there isn't really any, actually Airbender is probably the biggest sort of pop culture martial art, like Chinese martial arts influenced thing in the last like decade or so, right? That last Airbender. Because none of the Chinese have made some tremendous martial arts movies in recent years, but none of them have had as huge of an overall impact on as things like those 1970s and 1980s kung fu movies did, right?
Yeah. Well, I think Frank was a big fan of Mulan, right? Didn't you love Mulan, Frank?
Shawn, I just saw.
I haven't actually seen it.
I just saw a whole discussion on Facebook amongst a group of Singaporean Chinese talking about how wrong they went with that second Mulan. And they said like at least the first one, there were enough cultural, like the cartoon one, there was enough cultural references and things to tell that they did some research. And they said the second one, it was like they just got everything wrong. Like they just.
Well, did you see Disney's we're kind of getting off topic here, but Disney's putting out a new, it's called Raya and the Last Dragon. It's like,
is it Disney?
Yeah, Disney,
okay.
Pixar, or whatever, they're all, but I'm like, they're trying to make up for the Mulan debacle,
right?
And they're putting out this kind of martial arts inspired Disney movie, like a year later.
If we want to get off topic, it'll never match The Last Dragon. Barry Gordy of Motown Records put together a movie. He put together a movie in the 80s.
Show enough.
Which was kung fu, music, comedy, and it was pretty hilarious. But it's famous. It's part of our lineage because our boxing coach, my mentor, my best friend for 20 years, Vern the Bulldog Williams, is in that movie.
Oh, cool.
It's a small part, but he's Cujo the Mad Dog, the guy that breaks the desk with his head.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well, the guy, what's his name?
That's my guy.
Timac or Tamak? He's actually a
Timac
pretty.
was
He's a pretty well respected martial artist, no?
he was Ronnie Van Cleef's top guy.
Mm-hmm.
Vern brought him around. I was quite impressed. The night before the movie dropped that he was the star in, Vern brought him by the Wu-Tang, and we were hanging out and we were talking and whatnot. And I was really impressed because he was about to become a huge star, and he didn't talk about himself at all. He talked about Ronnie, his teacher, and how great Ronnie was and whatnot. I was pretty impressed that he was building up his teacher, not himself. He was a really good guy, but he made a horrible mistake. You may notice he was never in any major movie again, and he should have been a big star. But Barry Gordy had him signed to an exclusive contract where you don't do anything until I set you up again. And a couple of years went by with no work, and he did either Hong Kong or Singapore movie, and Barry Gordy caught him, and he got blackballed. That's how he never got to work again.
That sucks.
But
yeah, we definitely
really
got
nice
off topic
kid.
there. We got off topic big time. But yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, it was great to hear about this, and I've always wanted to go to the Wudong, and hopefully we'll be able to go out there again soon. But definitely when things are opening up. My last question, actually, this is something I forgot to ask. Is there is the tourism welcomed? Is it something for foreign tourism? Is it welcomed? Is it something that helps them? Is it something that they want? Or are people just being obnoxious and kind of? So how's that work out there? What's the dynamic?
No, people are generally nice and polite. I mean, you can run into some young kids, students that aren't, but generally everybody there is really polite and helpful and happy to have you there.
Yeah, I think that in general, the experience in China is I've always had sort of overwhelmingly a welcome response by locals, and certainly that is also the case in Wudang Shan. So, I guess it's worth mentioning, we don't know when the next training trip will be able to happen because, as you said, like things haven't opened. But next time we do go back to China to train, we're planning to also have that trip to Wudang Shan to get the second half of the meditation practices that we were, well, I said second half. I'm not sure if it's probably something like the second half of the first step of 10 or something, but
well, let's just say the second segment.
Yes, the second segment.
Well, and also too, for our listeners who might be interested, many of the trips that you and Tina organize are semi-open invitation, right? So if anyone is interested, they can reach out to you and Tina if and when we do schedule the next one to potentially join and participate in some of these trainings, right?
They're all open invitation. They've
Awesome.
always been open invitation. And so, they're us and our students, but there are also people that are interested from other areas. Get in touch with Tina and she hooks them up. And they're every time, it's been like 17 trips and they've all been open invitation.
Well, now we got this podcast. We might get a couple hundred people to go with us next time. Let's see.
That'd be different.
That would be very different.
Sure. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there. And then, it was great to hear about it. We also, for those who are listening to the podcast version of this episode, we've thrown some clips into our video version of Wudang Mountains. So if you're trying to get a little bit of a visual and some of the training that Frank, Jon, and others have gone through there, definitely check out the video version of this episode on YouTube. Obviously, subscribe, hit the little bell on YouTube so you can get access to it. Remember, our episodes premiere Wednesdays at 8 p.m. And even though you can just listen to the podcast version, it's always good to see our faces and see some of the clips that we're sharing in the video version as well. So, subscribe on your podcast listener, subscribe on YouTube, show us some support and share, make some comments, all that good stuff. We love that. And drop a review on iTunes and all that good stuff. check out in our show notes. Check out. Oh, I forgot to. By the time this airs, we're recording it a little bit earlier. But by the time this airs, we're probably gonna already in New York City have some outdoor classes happening through the Wudang on Friday nights. So for those who are interested, obviously space is limited, and priority goes to people who are already students. But if you're interested in training with the Wudang in person and you live in New York City, there's some opportunity, right, Frank?
Yes. Just go to the website and contact Tina. She sets that up.
Awesome. Cool. Well, great recording with y'all. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Take care.
Shawn. Thanks, Frank.